座ったままで大丈夫ですか？あ、座ったままで大丈夫です。
Friends, first we will have two short introductions and then we will open up for questions. So the first speaker today is Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Stoere. Please.
Good morning, everybody, and a special welcome to the Nobel laureates. It's a great honor to receive you here at Parkveien. This morning I received from children of the Japanese school in Oslo this fantastic token of a message of hope and peace. These are traner, birds created on paper by Japanese children in Norway. It is a wonderful Japanese tradition of peace and hope. And I'm happy to be able to bring it here as a sign for today and the days to follow. I would like to welcome the three co-chairs of the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Nihon Hidankyo, Mr. Terumi Tanaka, Shigemitsu Tanaka, and Toshiyuki Mimaki. It is a tradition that the Prime Minister receives the laureates of the Nobel Peace Prize the day after. And I've been very happy to convey on behalf of Norwegian government and parliament, and I believe of the Norwegian population, congratulations to Nihon Hidankyo on receiving the prize for exceptional work of its member during almost 7 decades. And the speech by the laureate yesterday made a deep impression on us. You know, the Norwegian Nobel Committee is a very independent entity that awards the Nobel Peace Prize according to the will of Alfred Nobel. Nihon Hidankyo received the prize for their efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons and for demonstrating through its work and grassroots activities and through real testimony of people who had experienced this only event of a nuclear weapon, why this weapon must never be used again. And for someone who was born 15 years after and who has grown up in a peaceful and stable country, it is deeply moving to hear these testimonies from someone who personally lived through and can testify to the light, the images, the smells, and the signs of the horror. So because of the tireless work of these survivors, the Hibakushuka, I grew up with acute awareness of these horrors, and it became part of a political movement around the world to create a world without nuclear weapons. We have to do a lot of work politically to bring nuclear disarmament back on the international agenda. It is depressing that the nuclear powers are withdrawing from treaties and agreements on disarmament, and that threats of using nuclear weapons is again being used in ongoing conflicts. We cannot accept this, and we have to, from every country, every government, and from grassroots mobilization, put pressure on the nuclear powers to re-engage in nuclear disarmament. Now, we have this word of a nuclear taboo, which means that One achievement of humanity is that the weapon has not been used since 1945. We have to keep that taboo alive and relevant, and I believe that this prize, at this grave international situation we live in now, where tensions are increasing and the threats of nuclear weapons are articulated, it is a very, very timely reminder. Because next year it will be 80 years, so we will enter 2025 with a strong message of this year's Nobel Peace Prize. So, Mr. Tanaka, congratulations, and thank you for articulating your strong message through Oslo.
Thank you. So the next speaker is Mr. Terumi Tanaka from Nihon Hidankyo. Please.
Thank you very much for this very welcoming and moving introduction from the Prime Minister. I'd like to express my thanks. Being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize this time, I have mentioned on several occasions, this is something that we had completely not expected at all. We had not anticipated any chance of receiving the prize. And so we are here now in Norway to accept the prize. So thinking about what kind of stance should we go into receiving this? What kind of speech should I make? What kind of words should I share? What should we even wear? I must say I was very anxious and concerned or worried about this. However, from when we arrived here in Oslo, met with the Norwegian Nobel Committee and the chair speaking with him, and also the ceremony itself, from being able to experience this, I feel strongly that our being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize this year is not only from the Nobel Committee, but this is something which is very much being welcomed by both the government and the people of Norway as well. I'm very glad to be able to feel this directly, so much that I'm moved to tears. And he was waiting for the interpretation, but we can continue. This morning as well, we had the chance to visit the Parliament and saw how much the Nobel Peace Prize is valued. And speaking with the President of the Parliament, together with also representatives from different political parties as well, we had the chance to discuss together. And of course, now the honor of being here and speaking with the Prime Minister as well, is we heard from the Prime Minister his very strong words and his determination towards the abolition of nuclear weapons and working towards nuclear disarmament. And we can see that this is consistent throughout the government from different political backgrounds here in Norway. And so, as you are aware, of course, Norway is a member of NATO. So we understand that there are certain, perhaps, limitations. And so we are sure that there are many challenges that the government is having to face as well. But we are certain that the Prime Minister, as he has shared with us, has the will and the determination to make change in order to make real steps towards nuclear disarmament, which we are very glad to hear. As a representative, one of the Japanese hibakusha, I think that, well, Japan, we hope that the Japanese government, unfortunately, we do not feel that they have sufficiently listened to the words that we have to share to our message. Because of its alliance with the United States, Japan has not yet either signed or ratified the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and it has a very stubborn position in regards to this. There is a new cabinet in place in Japan, and Prime Minister Ishiba and his cabinet, we are paying great attention to the discussions about what position Prime Minister Ishiba will take. He has said that he would like to meet with me once we return to Japan, so I'm very much looking forward to that so that we can share our message strongly with him as well. And so I'm very glad to have the chance here to speak with the Prime Minister of Norway and other political leaders here as well. And what I have learned here, I will be saying to the Prime Minister of Japan, I hope that you can learn from Norway. I hope that you can have more discussions as well. This is the message that I would like to share. And so within the situation of nuclear weapons around the world, of course, today is very severe and concerning. So we hope that there will be immediately steps to make sure, at the very least, that nuclear weapons will not be used. This is an urgent need in the world today, and everybody needs to work towards this. Therefore, hearing the words from the Prime Minister today, I feel very certain that Norway is able to stand on the forefront of efforts to ensuring that nuclear weapons are never used. And Japan is a country which experienced the wartime atomic bombs. I hope that Japan does, or needs to, I believe that Japan needs to play more leadership. And as Nihon Hidankyo, once we return to Japan, we will continue our discussions with the Japanese government, first of all, encouraging them, calling on them to work with the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And eventually, of course, we do hope that all nuclear weapons will be eradicated and that steps will be taken towards having the steps required to actually abolish these weapons. But today I had such encouragement from the words from the Prime Minister, and I'd like to express my deep thanks to him.
Thank you very much. So then we open up for questions. And if you can please use the microphone in the back, so the questions will be on the streaming as well. The first question goes to the Norwegian broadcaster, NRK.
Hello. I have a question for Mr. Terumi Tanaka-san. Almost 80 years have passed without the use of nuclear weapons. How do you consider the risk of it being used as of today?
So for me, I believe that it is very dangerous today. First of all, within the current situation, Russia and its invasion of Ukraine, when we think about things from this, we can see that Russia as a nuclear superpower, and saying that, or there have been direct public statements from the leadership in Russia saying that there is even a potential use of nuclear weapons. This is the kind of world that we are living in today, which is extremely dangerous. Nuclear weapons, the humanitarian consequences of concretely what happens, the kind of destruction which they bring about. I do not believe that President Putin actually understands the reality of these consequences. So ensuring that these weapons must not ever be allowed to be used again, having public opinion and also having political discussions, political negotiations through diplomacy as well, working towards this is an urgent issue. And we need to ensure that wars are ended as well. Any kind of war can develop into more and more serious situations. When we have seen all of the wars in the past in history, we have learned this as well. So we need to look at how to bring an end to war and have negotiations towards resolution of these situations, I believe.
Thank you. So the next question goes to Kyoto News, please.
Thank you very much. I'm from Kyoto News, a correspondent from Kyoto News. And so my question is for Prime Minister. And so what impact, what does the Hibakusha's voice impact your policy on nuclear weapon? And so does it have any, are you going to start thinking of changing your policy, or especially about the TPNW? And so are you going to ratify the treaty?
Well, first let me say that it is a very timely prize. As I said, 1 year before the 80th year marking of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing, we are reminded of the consequences, and we receive the strong messages from grassroots mobilization and from the insides of the survivors. That makes a deep impression on us, and it reconfirms that Norway's policy with this government, and I believe a broad majority, is to work towards nuclear disarmament with the objective of abolishing this weapon. Mr. Tanaka and I met in Oslo in 2012 when the process that led to this treaty was initiated. And it was the Norwegian government that took that initiative back in 2012. Through the entry point of humanitarian consequences of military armament. The government I represented left office in 2013, and the government that followed pulled Norway out of those negotiations in 2014, 2015. And for the time being, Norway, being member of NATO, which is an alliance which in its defense has nuclear weapons included, is a strong supporter of the objective of this treaty. But due to these alliance obligations, we have not signed or ratified the treaty. But we have been observing the work, we have been taking part in and supported processes in the non-proliferation treaty process in the United Nations. We have been supporting financially scientific work on verification on these important mechanisms to keep control. And we will keep pushing at every possible venue the nuclear powers to take responsibility and get back to a process of disarmament. The danger now is that the nuclear powers are pulling out of treaties and they are abandoning the regular negotiations and inspections of nuclear weapons. However, we have seen in the past that in times of very tense international relations, nuclear disarmament could be the first step to get back into dialogue and progress. So I believe we should maintain the hope that that can happen again. There's a special responsibility for the United States and Russia, but also China, that has been outside all these agreements. And of course we have to work hard on the NPT to avoid proliferation and new states pursuing the idea of getting nuclear weapons.
Thank you. And the next question goes to the Norwegian broadcaster TV2.
Thank you very much. I'm Stolt Alsnes from TV2 Norway. And my question goes to Mr. Tanaka. Since 1956, Nihon Hidankyo has been working tirelessly against nuclear weapons for an atomic ban, but equally tirelessly for compensation to the Japanese victims of the war. And, well, we can say we haven't reached the first topic and not the second one either. But how do you consider the possibilities of getting through some kind of compensation from the Japanese government after receiving the Nobel Peace Prize? And if I may, another question, could you please tell us what was the most memorable moment during your stay in Norway apart from the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony?
Thank you. What we are demanding in regards to state compensation for the damages caused by the atomic bombs, and well, our being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize this year, I think that things will... Well, I cannot anticipate that there will be any drastic change or large change in regards to this. The state, we have been calling on the state to have compensation for all of the damages caused by the atomic bombings. However, in regards to if there is compensation put in place, this would also bring up questions about compensation for other war victims, for example, as well. And so without having more solidarity between all people who were victimized by the war as well, I think that it is very challenging for our calls for state compensation to be heeded and reflected. However, the damages caused by the nuclear bombs, of course, caused so many tens of thousands of people to be killed as well. There was nothing put in place by the Japanese government in regards to the people who were killed by this. For the survivors, there is, for example, some medical relief, support for their medical treatment and life support as well. But for those people who are killed by the bomb, there is not even any expression or concrete measures or any kind of compensation in place on the part of the Japanese government. They are taking a very sort of hard stance in regards to this. So I don't anticipate that there will be much change, but we will continue to work towards the realization, and this is our determination.
そして今回オスロ滞在中に
Yes, sorry, I forgot to respond to that one. So, how should I say? I really feel that what left the greatest impression on me is... What was it again? I'm trying to remember. Sorry, I'm getting quite elderly. And what... I really feel that the whole of Norway has this shared will to abolish nuclear weapons. And I felt this very strong message from the Prime Minister, which gave me great encouragement. So today I was able to feel even more strongly certain about this. So once we go back to Japan as well, I will share that even for a country that is part of NATO, there is such a strong message about making efforts towards the abolition of nuclear weapons. And so looking at how Japan, as the only country which has experienced the wartime atomic bombings, is just maybe not doing anything about this, I would like to say that it is somewhat embarrassing or almost shameful for Japan not to take more action in regards to leadership for nuclear disarmament. So this is one of the greatest things and which I was very overjoyed about here in Norway.
Thank you. And then the next question comes from the Japanese broadcaster NHK.
Ryotomita from NHK. I want to ask for Prime Minister, what do you think about the attitude of Japanese government for nuclear weapon?
Well, I paid a visit to Japan 1 year ago, December last year, and I had good discussions with my Japanese colleague. Now there is a new Prime Minister in Japan, and Japan is a country close to Norway. We have, at our NATO summits, had special guests coming from South Korea, Japan, and Australia. They are partners for security in Asia. And I have experienced a large degree of like-mindedness in the approach to nuclear disarmament. And I hope that we can continue, inside different parts of the world, inside the United Nations system, to continue to be a voice for this. And I know that my diplomats working on these issues have special and good relations with the Japanese colleagues.
Thank you. The next question comes from the Norwegian paper Ungdomsavisa.
I'm Tuva Stormoen from Ungdomsavisa, a Norwegian youth paper. My question goes to the Prime Minister. What would you like to say to us, the youth, who are anxious about war and threats of the use of nuclear weapons?
Well, I think youth in my country and in Japan have been anxious about this issue every year. Every generation have had this very serious issue hanging over their head. And I think what we are reminded today is that those who experienced this terrible weapon use in 1945, they have worked for nearly 80 years to spread that message. And I think it is a combination of the message of hope, because the weapon has not been used again. It is called the nuclear taboo. It has to be taboo. It cannot be used. And some say that the value of the nuclear weapon is that it simply exists. But if it is used, it is just going to lead to the total destruction. So what I may say is that young people should keep hope and should find ways of engaging themselves in grassroots movements like we have seen with this year's Nobel laureate. Because what we will need is action at 3 levels. If we start with the grassroots mobilization, which is so important in democracies, that you put things on the agenda, you hold governments accountable, be it on climate change, human rights, and disarmament. Then governments also need to engage the scientific community to find ways of doing inspections and verifications and control of weapons and viable ways of reducing weapons. And then at government level, we need to engage the nuclear powers to get to the negotiation table and have meaningful negotiation. Because I believe that nuclear negotiations need to be balanced. There need to be reduction at all levels. So I hope you will find meaningful ways through youth organization, youth political parties, youth movements to engage for disarmament.
Thank you. We are running out of time, so the last question today will go to the Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun.
My name is Hanafusa of the Asahi newspaper. I have a question for Mr. Tanaka. And this was a similar question to before, but yesterday in your lecture, there was one sentence which you repeated in regards to state compensation. Yesterday in your lecture, you shared you emphasized state compensation. So you read this sentence twice in your lecture yesterday. I would like to ask when you decided this and why it was that you emphasized this. Sorry, my hearing is not so great. If you could speak up a little bit more. So we're repeating the question. In the Nobel lecture yesterday, Mr. Tanaka repeated one sentence in his script about state compensation. Would like to ask why it was that he wanted to emphasize this point and when he decided to do so. So the question for me, thank you very much for repeating that. So the reason that I added this, that I repeated this, is as I was speaking, I felt that I needed to repeat, to emphasize this question, looking at what kind of stance, the position that the state takes about the impacts of war on the citizens is an issue for Japan, but for all people. And I think that this is an issue of the relations between the state and the people, no matter where it is in the world in the war. It was on the moment, actually, at the lectern, at the podium, that I decided that I wanted to say this as well. This is something for both a domestic and international issue. So this is why it was a quite spontaneous feeling at the time that I felt I wanted to emphasize this impact or the relations between the state and the people when it comes to bearing the burden of the impacts of war. And so that was why I decided at that time to emphasize and repeat this sentence. Thank you.
So on that note, we need to wrap up this press conference. So now the Prime Minister, the laureates and their delegations will leave the room first. So I will kindly ask the press to wait here until they have left. And please move because they have to pass there. Thank you all for your cooperation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.